The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at www.mtsu.edu/CEM.
So this afternoon's session will address the topic of virtual resources to support English learners. It will be presented by Ms. Deborah France, ESL Director, Shelby County Schools, and Ms. Nancy Ibrahim, District ESL Coordinator of Jackson-Madison Schools. So now I'd like to introduce you to our presenters for this morning's session. Ms. Deborah France, Shelby County Schools.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Clark, and good afternoon, everybody. I am the Director for Shelby County Schools ESL program. My past has led me from being a gen ed teacher to an ESL teacher, ESL instructional advisor, Southwest regional advisor, WIDA trained. My whole world is ESL. I'm so excited to be here with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Ms. France. And her co-presenter today is Ms. Nancy Ibrahim of Jackson-Madison Schools.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today with you guys. My name is Nancy Ibrahim, and I have been working with ESL students for the last 15 years, the last 7 years in an administrative position, and the 8 previous years as an ESL teacher. And I'm so excited to get to be with you guys today.
Thank you, Ms. Ibrahim. So now I will ask that Deborah and Nancy join us on screen to begin the presentation. And if you'll be sure and unmute your audio, please, so we can hear everything you say.
Thank you so much. All right, so we have our beginning here today for English, for virtual support for our English language learners. So we're going to begin by a brief little interest survey. So it's fall, and to get everybody going here, we're going to get your opinion on something. And as Dr. Clark has reminded us, you can type your questions and your answers to these things that we're going to be asking you throughout the session in the live chat. So, for example, the first thing we want you to do is to tell us whether or not you love pumpkin spice. It's a definite yes for you, or you're just at the point to where you're like, nope, I've had enough pumpkin spice. That's it. I don't want to hear another thing about it. So that's our do now for you. And then we want to invite you to save for later, to jot down on a piece of paper who or what is your favorite ESL resource. So this could be an author, a book that you recently read or is just an all-time favorite, your blog that you're really into currently, or any podcast. So we're going to continue here, and we'll ask Dr. Clark in just a few minutes to give us the results of our do now, and then we'll check in with you for the save for later. We want to remind everybody that this is certainly a new time for all of us to really just engage in learning for ourselves and for our students due to the current COVID-19 situation. Some of you may be completely virtual, as we are in Shelby County Schools. Many of you are hybrid teaching, so we know that you have, and that could be any combination of things, depending on the day. And so we know that the stress is there and it's real, but we want you to know that although you may be new to distance learning, you aren't new to education. And this particular quote is taken from the Distance Learning Playbook. You can see up here at the top right, a very good resource that we're going to be drawing from a bit today. So here's today's agenda. We'll be discussing ESL curriculum and supports, ILPs, the what, the why, and the adjustments, translation and interpretation support, community resources for English learners and immigrant families, and engagement strategies. So, they'll be sprinkled throughout the presentation. We'll do a review at the end. We're also going to ask you for your thoughts on engagement strategies. And then we'll discuss a little bit of student and teacher care, because above all, if you're not functioning fully and feeling good, then we know that's not going to transfer into our teaching our students. And then finally, we'll invite you to make some connections towards the end, as well as be involved in the discussion board that I know Nancy will have more information on. Okay, so let's do a super quick review of ESL Alphabet Soup. The weather's a little cool out there, so we had a little soup theme going here. We have English learners, EL or ELL. WIDA, if you hear us talking about that, Tennessee is a member of the WIDA Consortium, which stands for World Class Instructional Design and Assessment. The WAPT or WIDA Screener, of course, that's the initial WIDA placement test. Access would be, of course, our summative English language proficiency test. ILPs, which is our individualized learning plans for our English learners. NELB, non-English language background students. Primary Home Language Survey, PHLS. So if you hear any of those particular acronyms or terms, this is where we are. Okay, Dr. Clark, do we have any results from our pumpkin spice survey?
Yes, we do. We had a total of 14 responses.
Okay.
And of that, 19 responses. I need to refresh my memory on how to count tally marks.
Oh, okay.
We have 9 yeses and 10 no's. With one very dramatic answer, no, pumpkin spice is the spawn of the devil.
Oh my goodness. Nancy, was that you who answered that?
No, not me.
That would have been Joseph, so we'll leave it at first.
Oh my goodness. Okay, well, so thank you so much for participating. And now that we know your true feelings about pumpkin spice, we'll turn it over to Nancy for curriculum.
All right, so the first topic on the agenda, we're going to be discussing some curriculum materials and some online platforms that you can use with your English learners. We're going to first be diving into some curriculum materials through a company called Continental Press, and then we'll be diving into some online platforms and some additional resources that would be helpful with your ESL students, especially during a time when we are moving to virtual, cyber, a mix, a hybrid of both. So we'll be doing a deep dive into all of these. All right, and so we'll first be discussing 3 different materials that come from Continental, and those are Team, Finishline, and Ready, Set, Go. I've also included on here contact information for the representative that you would contact if you find that you are interested in this or want to learn more. And I've also included the website that you could go to, www.continentalpress.com. And on there, you can actually see samples of the materials and get pricing information and just get more information about all of the different materials that they offer. So within Continental Press, they have several different materials, but we're just going to be focusing in on Team, Finishline, and Ready, Set, Go. Those are 3 curriculums that we're using in our district, and we've had a lot of success with them. So the first one we're going to be discussing is Team, and Team is aligned to state and WIDA standards, and it's also available in digital and hard copy format. And then Finishline is set up exactly like the access test that the students will take in the spring, and it's also available in an ebook format and hard copies. Ready, Set, Go is also available digitally and in hard copy format, and it's a curriculum for newcomers in 6th through 12th grade. So now we're just going to be discussing the teen curriculum. So the teen curriculum is available for kindergarten through 12th grade, and it includes structured activities that help ELLs develop academic language. And within the grade level academic language, it includes the topics for English language proficiency related to the domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. It also reinforces school curriculums with content and topics in science, social studies, mathematics, and language arts, which are all covered, through the WIDA standards. It also includes differentiated instruction that matches books to each student's level. So you really can be teaching the same class and have different levels based on the needs of particular students in that classroom. And then each of the lessons have 5 parts. There's a before we read, let's read, a listen and discuss, learning about language, and then lastly, they do a write about it. Right? Next slide.
Nancy, just before
Yes.
we move on, I just want to say that I'm so glad you're sharing this particular curriculum with us. I know in our district, we're investigating this and to supporting our English learners as well. So I appreciate this.
Right, so then I wanted to just dive in specifically talking about the ebooks for team. So we started out in our district using the hard copies, but with the shift to virtual, and we also have what's called cyber students that are completely online. So we have made a shift to utilizing the ebooks. These are ideal for distance and blended learning. You could also even use it with your in-person students, and that's just really going to depend on the amount of technology that you have available, to use with the students. And with the ebook format, there are some unique tools that are not available when on the hard copy format. So there are tools such as you can add notes, the students can highlight. For you as a teacher, you can create assignments for the students, and that can be very helpful, especially if you're using it with virtual students. And you can assign due dates. You are able to give students feedback on the work and assignments that they complete. You can also assign homework assignments. And you have the capability to create your own tests within the ebook platform. All right, and so then I wanted to dive into just the literacy piece of the team curriculum. So you're able to, and with team, let me say, it is geared for ESL students, but I truly believe that it could be used and probably is being used with struggling readers or students that have an IEP. So this can actually be used to screen for reading problems with students, and it's also a great resource that you can use for individual student progress. It also can provide intensive small group reading intervention, so it could be used for intervention time, especially if you're doing intervention time with ESL students or maybe just struggling readers. It also provides extensive vocabulary instruction, such as word family patterns, sight words, writing prompts, and so much more. There are also a peer-assisted learning, so there's opportunities to encourage students so that they're able to reflect on their strengths and identify areas of need. There's also reading comprehension skills and reading strategies that are built into the literacy piece of the curriculum. And then it also is very useful in helping students to build background knowledge. All right. And so that was just about team. Now I will say in our district, all of my teachers are using team since it is available for K through 12, and it is very teacher friendly, very user friendly, and honestly, we have just been loving it. We are going into our 3rd year of use, and it has really become our go-to ESL curriculum. So next I wanted to discuss Finishline. Finishline is amazing because it mimics exactly the test, the access test that the students will see in the spring. And so this is a really good way to help them get comfortable with the test. It is available for grades 1st through 12th. It's not available for kindergarten students because the access test that the kindergarten students take is a lot different. It's paper pencil versus the online test that students take in 1st through 12th grade. It mimics the test item types, such as multiple choice, short writing, extended writing prompts, and oral response. It is also aligned to the English language standards, social studies, language arts, science, and math. And it's also, it's not specified for the use of, TCAP or TN Ready preparation. Would be a good way to get students ready for those standards as well. It has a central theme that is tied to the content areas for each lesson. And the ebooks, if you were to utilize the ebook format, it's actually very interactive, and it's actually compatible on most, if not all, devices. And so I know that's really important because not everyone, has an iPad or a Kindle or whatever. So it is available. It can be used on most devices. You can even access it on phones as well. there is also a printed format, and so that gives the students a chance to just so they can practice it anywhere, anytime, because sometimes you don't have the devices available and you might not have them all the time. And I will say one way that some of my teachers are using it, they wanted to have the hard copies. So what I did was I purchased a license just for the teachers so that they can broadcast it on their Promethean board, so the students are still get a feel for what the online version of it looks like, but the students are following along using their printed format of the curriculum. So that has been very beneficial, because I will say with the ebook licenses, those are only good for 1 year. But if you have the printed format, you have them for as long as, you want to keep them.
Yeah, it's a great combination. Okay.
Yeah. And then within Finishline, just a little bit about the lessons. So there are model lessons, just like, when the students are taking the access test, there's a model that comes on. And if I'm not mistaken, is it Nina, I think, that does like the model questions on access, kind of a practice question. And so it's kind of mimicking the exact same thing. There's also 4 domain units, talking about listening, speaking, reading, and writing. There's also built-in management so that the teacher can score the items on the test. You can also access performance reports. And you can also, you're able to score the speaking and writing items. And that's great, because then you can turn around and give feedback to your students so that they can see like what they would need to do to maybe get from a 3 to a 4, ways to get them to improve their writing. And it's just great for you to be able to see maybe their areas of weaknesses or strengths when they're doing their writing and when they're giving their speaking, and you can access their recordings. It also has the capability of custom test creation, so you can actually kind of create a test for the students to take that would, be closely, mimic the access test. And it also comes with an annotated teacher's edition, and it's also very user-friendly. And I would say that definitely this would need to be used with fidelity at least 2 to 3 times a week, so that it does make a difference. And also it helps students to get comfortable with the format of the test, because you just don't want to pop open that screen, the access test, on the day of testing. And I know that there are some samples on the WIDA website, but I think this is just great to have ongoing practice. And then as the test gets closer, you could potentially do it, 5 days a week. But I would think that starting out from the beginning of the school year, doing 2 or 3 days a week is very, very beneficial. And the students, honestly, in our district have become so much more comfortable, because they're like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this every week, So the test just looks to them like the work that they're, doing on a daily basis. So we've really, really been enjoying it.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, we're familiar as well with the Finishline, and I agree with you 100%. The more familiar and comfortable the children are with the assessment, the better they're going to do on it. Yeah.
I agree. All right, next slide. All right, so this is a newer curriculum for Continental, and it's called Ready, Set, Go Newcomers. And what's great about it is that it's specific for 6th through 12th graders, because a lot of the resources that are out there are kind of babyish in the materials. And so sometimes you find that those middle and high school students are kind of embarrassed, with some of the pictures and things that are on there. So this is just great because it's more, more appropriate for these students. And it is a newcomer curriculum, because, you get newcomers in all kinds of grades. And so when they're coming in the older grades, it has been a challenge for us to find curriculums that are specific to the secondary grades. And so this has been wonderful. So within it, there is skill building from phonics to social communication to academic language. It has age-appropriate materials, and it has, it's really most appropriate for professionally levels 1 and 2. It could potentially be used with students that are a level 3, and I'm talking about like WIDA scores as far as like literacy and overall, but it also could be used potentially for a level 3 as well. It also has a lot of teacher support designed within it, and it has like a lot of things that help to guide your instruction. It's also something that is wonderful to be used for SIFE students, and I included what that means. So SIFE are students with interrupted formal education. So sometimes you get students that have never been in school ever before. So this is something else that is great for these students, because there are 3 different levels for Ready, Set, Go. There's a book 1, book 2, and book 3. So you could potentially have students from those 3 different levels, and I would equate that to like a beginner, intermediate, and advanced. as far as in the newcomer world. And they could each be using a different book, and the teacher can instruct. And so each student is getting differentiated instruction using this material. All right, next slide. All right, and then for the lessons, I kind of mentioned this, the 3 book levels. There's the teacher's edition includes pacing guidelines. And with this, there's also the ebook format available. So there's the hard copy and the ebook version. And it has a lot of, the ebook does offer personalized instruction. And it includes some of those student tools that I mentioned about the highlighting and adding notes and giving students feedback and assigning lessons. And it also includes some support materials that come along with it. So it includes like a picture dictionary, and it also has like flashcards that are geared for newcomers and vocabulary picture cards, which are a great tool to use, with any of your students. And then especially, with the newcomers, they're very important to have. All right, and so now I just want to go into some online platforms that we have been using and have become so beneficial, post-COVID, during COVID, during the time of COVID, these have just become go-tos. So the first one I wanted to talk about is Learning A to Z. So Learning A to Z is ideal for pre-K through 6th grade students. It could be used for older students, but as far as, age appropriate materials within it, I would definitely say that 6th grade would probably be the highest level you'd want to use it with. And so there are so many different materials within Learning A to Z. So Learning A to Z is kind of like the umbrella, and then underneath it, there is Reading A to Z. There's something called Raz Kids, and that includes like leveled readers. There's Head Sprout, and which is a reading intervention program. And that can be used with ESL students. And again, that could also be used with your struggling readers, students with IEPs, Science A to Z, Writing A to Z, Vocabulary A to Z. And that writing component is wonderful, and another tool that's great to use in getting your students ready for that access test. Vocabulary A to Z, that's a great tool to use with newcomers. So I would even venture to say that with that Vocabulary A to Z, you might even be able to use it for your middle and high school students because they do need that vocabulary. And then there's also the ELL edition, and that includes a lot of differentiated instruction and resources. Also within Learning A to Z, the students take a placement test, and then they're set on a learning path within these. So with Learning A to Z, you can opt to purchase just one of those different things that I mentioned that are under the umbrella, or you can purchase the whole thing. So of course, it's a lot cheaper if you purchase all of it. And honestly, in comparison to so many other tools that I have found as far as online platforms, Learning A to Z is a lot more affordable. And my teachers have been loving it. And there's so many resources that come with it. Like, it would take you years to get through all of it. It is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely true. I just wanted to say we love Learning A to Z as well. And just the fact that you can go in and search for any topic and find anything at various levels is just, it's wonderful. So, and I agree with you 100%. We've used this for years as well, and are a huge fan.
It includes also a library. So there's like a library within Learning A to Z, and it has books in so many different languages.
Yes.
Spanish, Vietnamese, I think there's like Polish, Ukrainian. So that's great too, because the great thing about Learning A to Z is the parents can actually download the app on their phone or any kind of device. And the students, because they have their login from school, they can log into it. And so the parents could read those books to them, even in their native language or English language. So they can have access to Learning A to Z, 24 hours a day. So we have really been loving it. The classroom teachers have even, the ESL teachers share the login information for the students. And so some of these students are actually using it in their regular classrooms too.
That's great. It's a great homeschool connection.
Yes, definitely. All right, and then this one is actually newer to us that we started using this year. So we were just trying to find the right fit for students that are in 6th or 12th grade. And, it just seems like there's a lot less resources out there for ESL students when they get to those higher grade levels. So that Ready, Set, Go that I had mentioned, and then this Admentum. So the program that we use is called Exact Path. And it's basically kind of like Learning A to Z, where they're taking a placement test and then it sets them on a path. But this one is more age appropriate for your middle and high school students. And it's an online curriculum. It also includes focused interventions that are based on individual student needs. It's paced learning that's based on their instructional level. And then there's also meaningful data so that you can monitor and progress monitor the students over time. And as I said, it's age appropriate, high quality instruction for the students. And we have really been enjoying using the exact path for our ESL learners this year. This is something new to us this year. So I don't have any data yet to show how helpful it has been, but so far from the feedback that I received from my teachers, they are really enjoying it, especially for the middle, because it's ideal for the middle and high school.
That's great.
All right, and then just a few other the programs that I just wanted to mention that we have used in the past or currently use. Imagine Learning. So Imagine Learning has literacy, assessment, and math. And Imagine Learning does have one feature that is unique to it, is that the students, I think it has so many different languages that the students can actually be listening to their language on the headsets, but what they're seeing on the screen is in English. So it really is nice as far as that. Do you guys use that?
We have, yeah, and I just I want to emphasize as well. I mean, it's just we've seen children when they put their headsets on and they hear the home language, and you just like it's a little bit of a break for them.
Yes.
So it's fabulous in that respect.
iReady is one that we currently use in our district. It's actually being used district wide, and it's specific to reading and math. And so I've actually gotten to see this from the student side because my daughter is in the district and has to utilize this program every day. And it's very interactive. It's really fun. And she's only required to do a certain number of minutes a week, but she always ends up going over because it's just so interactive and so much fun. So that's another one that's also great for struggling readers, interventions, ESL students. It's also a great program as well. And then Linked is one that can be used for speaking assignments. And I think that is great to do a lot of speaking assignments because I feel like one of the areas that students really struggle with on the access test is the speaking. They get nervous, even though you'll see the scores and you'll be like, oh my gosh, I know they could have done so much better on this.
Right.
And I think that's an issue statewide that we'll see that this student would have tested out, but it was just the speaking score. So I think focusing in on practicing speaking with the students is essential. And then making sure that, with those students that, that are very nervous and very shy, to make sure sometimes when you're doing the access test, one thing I would recommend is maybe giving them the test alone, not letting them be in the room alone, or just making sure you have enough space between the students so that they feel very comfortable enough to speak. Because sometimes that's one thing, especially in the middle and high school, they're just kind of nervous to speak on that, on there. And it's also Linked is also a great one for writing assignments. And this was a program that a few of my teachers have been using, and especially used when we got out of school in March. And so they were able to do assignments, give assessments, and it was great that the teacher was able to still hear the students' voices with the recordings and, give them feedback. And then the last one I just kind of wanted to mention is News ELA. And News ELA is language-based, and it also can be individualized. And News ELA is free, but you can purchase, I guess, for some upgraded things that come with it. But we're currently only using the free one, but I have been looking into maybe purchasing some of the other features that would be added on. But it's also great because it has a lot of great reading on the students' level and things that actually interest the students.
And isn't the News ELA, it's all current events, right?
Correct. Yes. Right, and so now we just wanted to pause and see if you guys have any questions, if you have any additional comments, or maybe there's just some other questions, maybe not related to what I discussed, that you wanted to go ahead and ask. If you want to, please go ahead and type that in the chat box.
I'm waiting on some questions to come in, but I do want to, I'd like for you to address the issue of when students are working online, if there's ever any confidential information, how do you address the protection of confidential information when students are doing virtual learning?
So I know that, as far as like using Zoom, for example, if students are using Zoom, that the students can't be, if the lesson is being recorded, the students can't be on the screen. And I think they've implemented a lot more passwords and things like that so that it is a lot more safe. And so that no one else is able to access that presentation or that recording except for the ones that have been given the username or password. Do you have any other suggestions, Deborah? I'm not.
Well, I'm just thinking the same. We've had similar concerns in our district. So there's been a lot of back and forth and discussion in terms of, do we use the chat? Do we not use the chat? Do we have the cameras on? Do we have the cameras off?
Yeah.
Because I think we can all relate to the fact that we've seen a student and every day in our classroom, but we haven't seen them in their home and, the background. And so there's that confidentiality. So I think it's, it's very district specific as to if they're using both of those features. So it's just something that, I know the heads of the districts would need to discuss in terms of really what's best for the kids in each district.
Okay, so we do have another question. This question is from Joseph for Nancy. Nancy, do you create pacing guides for the Continental Press materials? He says, we're a few steps away from making our first purchases of Team, Newcomer, and Finishline. So what about the pacing guides?
So the pacing guidelines are already included within the curriculum. So no, I don't create the pacing guidelines. Everything's already included within the curriculum. And some teachers are jumping around from different lessons so that they're not always all starting. All of my ESL teachers are not on the same lesson at the same time. So they all use it to fit their needs. Because some of my teachers are actually using the ELA curriculum that we have in our district, and they're just using Team to supplement. And that's one thing definitely, is that most of my ESL teachers that are using Team are using it to supplement, along with utilizing the skills and the vocabulary from our district ELA curriculum.
And that's a good question, because I think that often comes up, is it something that is very specific, or can you use it by jumping around? So that's good to know.
We have another question from Deborah. This is a question from Deborah. Do you have any suggestions about working with non-English speaking parents online?
Nancy, while you're thinking about this, one that comes immediately to my mind is Rosetta Stone has a community component, and we're using Rosetta Stone for our very our newcomers in high school. So it's a very specific set of students. But in purchasing that, there was also a community component. So I think, I'm trying to remember correctly, it was a couple of thousand of licenses, for however much it was. But you're able to put this online so that parents can access it. It's a level 1 English, and of course it is online. So that's one thing that's an option.
So we typically every year, to help support parents, we always have adult English classes. Now we're thinking about switching it to an online format this year, to where it'll be virtual. So they'll kind of be joining in with a Zoom link, and that way they can have their child with them if they would like. And when we were providing it in person, we were also providing early intervention classes, so that if they had children ages 3 to 5, we were also utilizing a pre-K teacher to work with those students if they were learning English too, because early intervention is key. But of course, during COVID, we're not sure what those early intervention classes might look like virtual. We're just not sure how 3 to 5-year-olds are going to do virtually on a computer, but we are planning to do adult classes virtually. So that's definitely an idea I would suggest.
Absolutely. I think, we're having to think this through, because we have had before, the in-person classes just like you have. So it takes a bit of rethinking how you're going to do things now.
Yeah.
We have another question from someone about, which program do you find works well at district level, district-wide? Which program do you use district-wide?
I guess that's in terms of curriculum, perhaps.
This question doesn't specify, but they're just wanting to know, some programs fit particularly well in certain classes or ages, and others in certain other ones. But are there any of these that you use district-wide?
So if we're talking about as far as for ESL students, if I were to suggest a curriculum out of the ones that I spoke about, I would suggest Team. Team is definitely one that we use district-wide for K through 12. Now, if we're talking about ELA curriculums or things like that, we're using CKLA in grades K through 2 And then we're using EL, Expeditionary Learning, for grades 3rd through 5th grade. And then 6th through 12th grade, we're using LearnZillion. So those are the ELA curriculums, and most of my ESL teachers are utilizing the skills and the vocabulary from those, and a lot of them are front loading that information to the students, so that then when the students go back into their classroom and they're getting the lesson on that, they're like, oh my God, I just learned about this, and they might have some knowledge that maybe some of their peers may not have once they go into the classroom and are getting those lessons. But if we're talking about the curriculums that I suggested, if you were to go with one as far as like hard copies and ebooks, I would say Team. But if you wanted something as far as an online platform, Learning A to Z for sure.
Okay, great. Don't have any online questions at the moment, but I took a quick poll of the participants just saying, what grade levels do you teach? And so presenters, for your info, we have a pretty nice balance. We've got pretty nice balance between the elementary grades of K5, pre-K5, and then the 6-12 grouping. So we have about equal presence here in this in participants today. So please continue as you're doing to give us ideas for the whole full range of grade levels.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. Okay, so we are going to move on now to individualized learning plans. The what, the why, and the adjustments that perhaps we have needed to make because of hybrid or virtual teaching. So we're going to get your feelings on IOPs. How do you feel about them? This is a chance for you to participate a bit with us. We want you to place the number that represents how you feel about IOPs in the chat with one word that describes the feeling that the GIF represents for you. So for example, if you are number 2 and you're just like, I don't know, I'm really uncertain, you could put 2-uncertain if that's what number 2 represents to you. Nancy, any reflections on the kind of a course of feelings that you guys have had regarding IOPs?
Well, I'll definitely say that when we first learned about having to implement these ILPs, I think it was 3 years ago, me and my teachers were definitely feeling like number 2, very nervous about it. But I will say we have started using something that I think made my teachers jump for joy, like number 4. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later. I think it's definitely helped a lot. And I think just getting more comfortable with ILPs, and it's just, it's taking some time.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can definitely relate to that. I think that when the state policy came out and saying that we had to update it every 4.5 weeks, I probably felt like number 3. I was just really, really, oh my goodness, how are we going to do this? Because we have, the number of English learners that we have. And but anyway, it's always fun to see kind of where everybody is in their progression of emotions regarding IOPs. So if you haven't already done so, go ahead and put in the live chat there how you're feeling and what that particular number feels like for you. All right, so while you're doing that, we did want to discuss and review really why individualized learning plans are important. We have some samples of existing ILPs and considerations for student engagement in virtual learning, as well as there's a link at the bottom of the screen there to the ILP FAQs. So at this time, I'm going to invite you as I read this aloud. And I'm going to go at a little bit slower pace than typical. But as I read this aloud, I want you to key in on any words or phrases that really resonate with you regarding why IOPs are important. So as I begin, go ahead and just type in the chat, just anything that jumps out at you as, oh yes, this is what we need to pay attention to, or this is why it's important. ILPs are designed to ensure that English learners are being served and are on track to meet the linguistic and academic expectations each year. The development and implementation of ILPs provide key supports, such as supporting language acquisition across the instructional day, providing meaningful participation in core instruction, enabling students to reach grade level targets in their academic subjects, and coordinating instructional approaches, including collaboration among all educators. So as you continue to put those words or phrases that really just resonate with you in the chat, we're going to move on for just a moment. And at this time, I'm going to invite Dr. Clark back on if she would. And Dr. Clark, can we start with just kind of going back to the 1 through 4 GIFs? How are people feeling out there?
We had a few responses, and we had more 3s than anything else.
Okay.
Oh.
We did have some creative, detailed people that would give me a different number for every day of the week.
Oh.
And we had several LOLs because they were laughing because they loved it.
Okay.
And we had one 2.5.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's great.
Some of the descriptors are supporting, anxious, necessary, nervous, collaborative, collaboration, supports. Those were some of the descriptive words that came through the responses.
So thank you for that, because when I was reading that and reviewing this and just hearing the words, collaboration is definitely one that I honed in on, because without collaborating with our peers, with the different departments, then we truly, we cannot support our English learners. So let's take a look now at this is a state example, and you see it says draft, but this is all something that I'm sure we're quite familiar with in terms of what the state IOP looks like as an example. So we have the demographics up top, we have the place for RETA assessment, pass scores, we have the student growth trajectory and the accountability, as well as, you have the option to put in the recently arrived, long-term, and SPED designations. This down at the bottom corner, just to give you a little bit more background on that, in case you're not aware of it, the growth criteria is set through the accountability protocol manual provided by the Tennessee Department of Ed. And just, not going into a whole lot of detail here, but basically what we're seeing is based on last year's score, what is the expected rate of growth based on the WETA access level. So that was determining whether or not they met the growth standard. So what we're going to do now is take a look at the accommodations page. And this is where I really need you to help me out here, because we're going to chunk it in just a moment so that we're not looking at the entire document at once. But I want you to begin to think about how your world has changed. If you had it at any point, if you had to teach virtually, it could be that you had to go back and you're recalling what happened in the spring or what you're currently doing now. But in terms of this first part for instruction and summative assessments, what are some ways that we have adjusted to teaching virtually, yet offering these same supports? So, for example, I know that so many of us are familiar with providing visuals, pictures, and charts and graphs to our students as we're providing instruction, or advising our colleagues that they need to do the same. So how has that changed for you if you had any part like teaching online? Where was your go-to for looking at visuals? And this can be as simple or as difficult as you want to make it. You say, okay, I Googled a picture, I go online. So, all ideas are welcome here. There are also our typical instruction accommodations we've had are word-to-word dictionaries, bilingual dictionaries, graphic organizers, colored screens, changing the font, changing the text size. I would be interested in knowing really what resources you have found for this, the colored screens and changing font. How about read aloud? We're going to take a look at some of these in just a moment, but what have you found either within your online curriculum, if you have that, what have you found that has allowed students, even in a virtual world, to be able to have things read aloud to them? Extended time, how do you manage that in a virtual world? There's always the rewording and simplification of instructions, frequent and multiple checks for understanding. That's something that I just mentioned briefly with Kahoot. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but we couldn't play that super fun game today due to the way that the format is set up, but I invite you to investigate that a little bit more. And then let's look at our summative assessments. Read aloud in science, math, social studies, extended time, rest breaks. What about rest breaks in a virtual world? How is that working for you? I want to share just a little bit because I know some parents' concerns are around the amount of screen time that perhaps a child is being asked to participate in. One idea that several of our schools have implemented is to have office hours, especially for our high school students. So there are deliberately planned breaks where the students are not to be on the screen. So that's kind of, again, that's a rest break. Now, in particular, is it regarding a summative assessment? No, but, could it be? It possibly could be, but I'm just saying in terms of supporting people virtually in the environment, we need to have that break from being spoken to, as you are right now, all day online. Okay, so here are a few ideas and just very, very simple. So what happens if you go online and you search for graphic organizers? There's just a plethora of resources out there and ideas. So again, if you search for something, maybe it's to organize a paragraph, an idea, just an overall composition, you can pick and choose. What I love about the internet is that there are so many different resources out there. If you're teaching, the lower grades, you get these really fun graphics. Even for the upper grades, they're interested in those things as well. I don't want to make everything just, cut and dry. But for the little ones, you have things like, simple, here we have transportation. And then it's incredibly detailed when you get more and more into sciences. So again, something as simple as doing a Google search and embedding these into your online platforms, such as the whiteboard that's available, teacher-created assignments. So just kind of sharing. And we'll pause here for a moment to see some ideas because I do see a few things popping in over here on the live stream. Something else. Let's think about this. We'll read aloud. ESL teachers, or any educator, quite honestly, let's think about this. The text can be read aloud as you read, and you can even change the speed. So as we've often asked our colleagues, don't speak so fast, you have to slow down because the teachers, that the kids are not understanding you. This can be done automatically. We just have to make sure that the children know how to do it. Another point is highlighting words as you read and taking notes through them. These are some things that are automatically built into online curricula. If they're not, it could be as simple as a copy paste onto a Word document and engaging in the features through what is available through Word. Something else, home language supports. So let's think about this. How wonderful is it that some curricula even have just a button right here in front of the children? This is from My Perspectives. We use My Perspectives in 6 through 12 here. But just having that online support, how fabulous is that? So we don't want to just completely say, okay, you're going to be receiving all of your instruction in your home language, but it's nice to have them have the capability of reading it both in English and their home language. And then something as simple as being able to just click on a particular word and having the option of seeing that definition in a home language is another true advantage. Okay, so I'm going to pause here. Dr. Clark, did we have anything in particular come through during this time?
Yeah, Sarah suggested or said that they've been using the Noun Project for some awesome visuals They're free and they have a ton of graphics, she says. She says she can really be thoughtful and intentional about the messages that her visuals are conveying because of all the options in the Noun project.
Thank you, Sarah, for that and for the Noun project. I'm going to just go ahead and share this. We have a new initiative here in terms of just getting down back to the basics, and one of them is using a universal language, like the 36 keywords, and what we've actually combined that. So it's a definition, the word, the definition. So it might be analyze, and then the definition, and then there's a visual, and then we invite children to draw in their own connection. But we're taking that, let's say, a step further in terms of we're also providing, since this will be used across the district, we're going to be providing those definitions in Spanish and Arabic as well, since those are our top two languages. But again, it ties in with the visuals. So thank you for that.
And then we had another response. Joseph says that their K-5 LMS is Google Classroom. There are Chrome extensions, for example, Read and Write, that have read aloud features. It works well with Google products. And their 612 LMS is Schoolology and does not have this feature.
So I should have expected that Joseph would have something great and technical for us, because he always does. Thank you, Joseph, for sharing that with us. And I think it's just, it's a bit of reaching out to your colleagues who are perhaps more techie, and they are just, that's their love and their passion along with education. So we certainly do appreciate that contribution. All right, we're just going to finish up here on ILPs by doing an additional look at environment and setting and formative assessments. So this is what I want to hear from you at this point. Cooperative learning groups in a virtual environment, or let's say even, how about this one? Proximity to teacher. How do you think through and arrange for those two things? If students need a smaller group setting, let's say if perhaps you are co-teaching, as this morning we had Whitney, who was a co-teacher who was presenting. So if she's co-teaching in that math class and she realizes she needs to meet with a smaller group of students, or maybe have a one-to-one with a student, how do you do that in a virtual setting? I know that in this district we use Teams, and as Joseph has mentioned, every district has their own online teaching platform. But what I've heard from some of our teachers is that they will pull them into a separate channel. They'll arrange in Teams for a separate channel, and at some point, they have pre-arranged with their co-teacher that they need to, okay, at this point in the lesson, I'm going to take these 3 students and we're going to be over here, and just really further, communicating and making sure that they understand what their task is. That's one thing, is just to have a channel or a separate meeting. Proximity to teacher, I think that kind of ties in as well, because if I am teaching to a group of 25 versus a group of 3, then even though I'm not physically closer, I have that more direct contact with them. So that could be beneficial as well. And then think about same language peers and peer pairing. If we're talking again about pulling them into a smaller group setting, you could arrange for a mix of upper and higher and lower level English language proficiency to be grouped together so that they can assist one another. And we talked a little bit already about read aloud items and had a bit of information about that. So at this point, I believe I'm going to ask, is there anything additional, Dr. Clark, that maybe somebody had regarding environment and setting or formative assessments?
An idea came in from Hamid and for Tech Buddy with breakout rooms for collaborative groups. Tech Buddy.
Okay, a Tech Buddy. I like that. Thank you so much. All right, fantastic. So again, I think it just, we have to get a little bit creative here, right? We have to just realize what tools we're working with, what our intention is, and how we're going to help with the students. So Nancy, let's tell them a little bit more about Elevation here and IOPs.
I'll start off by saying I'm not a spokesperson for Elevation or for Continental. They're just, products that we've been using and we love, and I want to share them. Now this will be our second year using Elevation, and Deborah's district has just purchased Elevation as well. And I know I was referring to this because I said that we're now kind of feeling like a 4, and my teachers have been jumping up and down for joy. So Elevation is a program management platform, and within Elevation you can actually create the ILP documents, and that has just been such a time saver because we basically just took the template that the state sent and put into it the growth trajectory, and sometimes those ILPs ended up being 8 to 10 pages long. And so it was a big task. And then going in and having to update them every 4.5 weeks, it was just very challenging. And with the number of ESL students we had, it was just really, really challenging. But I will say as a suggestion that if you are going to be using that template, you can try to keep them saved online, whatever, if you use OneDrive or Google Drive. I don't know, we're not a Google district, we're a Microsoft. So we use OneDrive. So we were saving the ILPs on there. So that way the next teacher that gets that student can use that same ILP and just update whatever they need to on that. So they're not having to recreate the ILP, and it's all saved online on the cloud. So that was one way that it was making it easier once we got to the second year of using the ILPs. But now that we have Elevation, it basically has a template within it. And you can even edit the ILP template that's on there, and then it actually stores the ILP documents on the platform. So you don't even have to print them out if you don't want to. Of course, if you choose to print them out, you can. And also another thing that we have used it for that has just been amazing is monitoring forms. We monitor students every 9 weeks in our district, and we monitor our T1s through T4s, our Ws, and within the platform, we also have the option to progress monitor the Ls, because if you want to know how they're doing in the regular classroom, if you want to see what their grades are looking like, just so you can kind of keep up with them, and maybe sometimes based on the responses you're seeing from that, you might see that, okay, I might need to go meet with this classroom teacher, have a conversation with them, and let them know about some additional accommodations or modifications that the specific students might need. So basically what it does is that you set the dates on it, it sends out the monitoring forms to the classroom teachers automatically, and it also sends out reminders to them if they don't fill out the document. And that has just been amazing. That has just been amazing because we know that the forms are going out on time, and the teachers have gotten pretty good about filling it out because it's a really simple form. There's nothing they have to print out or sign or anything. They can electronically sign it. So I would say the form takes them between 3 to 5 minutes to complete. So, and then when it sends them the reminders, if they don't want to keep on getting those reminders, they just go ahead and get it completed. Yeah. It also, within the platform, has data tracking. So you can actually see the percentages of the different languages and the specific numbers of different languages you have in your district, different ethnicities, how many L's, how many W's. There's just so much data tracking within it. We had kind of created our own kind of data tracking using an ESL, like an Excel, but it requires a lot of work. So this is great because you can see everything at a glance, and you basically have a profile for each student, and you can see their previous WIDA scores. You can see their, when they entered, their screener scores. You can see everything related to that student. You can also input notes. If you have meetings, you can input notes within the platform. So it is just great because you have basically, it's kind of like an IEP, I guess you would say, but, and has a profile to where you can view and share with others online. And the monitoring forms are housed online. We used to print out every single monitoring form, give it to teachers, wait till we got back. The teachers lost the copies. Right. So now there are no more forms to print out or for them to sign. They just fill it out, and we're just keeping the forms on the cloud. And you do have the capability to go back and print them whenever you need them. But, if your district is being monitored, so you might need to have some of those hard copies, or you might need to print out and scan some of those. But it has just saved us a lot of room in our filing cabinets and a lot less legwork for the ESL teachers.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm sure it saved teachers a lot of time because I think just in looking at when we were looking at adopting this, that was the biggest advantage is we know teachers want to spend their time planning and being productive and taking care of their students. And, we realize compliance is a huge part of ESL, but it shouldn't be the main part. It should be like, okay, this is done. We have to document it. But we actually, just as you mentioned, we're new to this, but we have some upcoming training with Elevation and I'm so excited. Every morning it's just like there for a while. I was looking it up and saying, hey, what's on the dashboard today? What are those graphics? And it's a great way to review things.
It really is. So the way Elevation works is that it can be aligned. So in our district, we use PowerSchool for SIS, but you might use, something else. I think there's Skywalk. I've heard of different ones, but basically those Elevation and PowerSchool or your SIS just connect together. And so basically anything that, changes or anything that's put into PowerSchool every night, it feeds into Elevation. So the next day, the information is updated on there. Now, I will say there are a minimum number of accounts required to be able to purchase Elevation. But one thing that I've heard that some districts have done is some districts have gotten together so that they had the minimum number of accounts that are required and were able to purchase it together. So if your district is smaller, you might think about getting with some other districts that are close by and looking at, purchasing the program. If you need information about the representative that I use, I can share that with you. It might not be the same representative that you'll have, but he can at least get you in the direction you need. If you're wanting to look into it, try it out, they might be able to give you like a trial just to see what it's like and so that you can see all the components. And there are even some other components that we didn't purchase that are available within Elevation. Because it's kind of pricey, but worth every penny. If you were to ask my ESL teachers, worth every penny. They're constantly thanking me for purchasing that. Also, one great thing about it is that every single teacher and administrator in your district is given an Elevation account. So that means that your classroom teachers are able to log in and be able to see those student profiles. They can see notes, they can see background information, they can see their previous scores, they can see their current level, their language proficiency level, and they're able to just get a lot of background information on the students and any meeting notes. So just they can really get a really good feel for the student and know more about them. And also for the administrators, if they're needing to look up some quick information before a meeting, it's a great way to see everything. It's a quick glance at the ESL student's profile. And so that has just been something that has really gotten the classroom teachers to really collaborate even more with the ESL teachers because they have access to that profile now and they're constantly looking it up. Okay, let me see what I could do. Let me see what accommodations are listed for this student. Let me see how I could better, help that student.
Yeah, so, I'm so glad you mentioned that because I think that's another true advantage to this program. It's not just the ESL teacher who is the holder and the keeper of all information. Even though we know we try to share this, it's just now it's up to each individual teacher. Hey, you have immediate access. Go ahead and click on this and you can learn more about the student.
Yes. Yeah. And then I just wanted to share just a glimpse of, what the ILP kind of looks like within that platform. So at the top, you have the demographic information, you have English proficiency test scores. You can even add in there to where it'll have like TCAP scores on there as well, so that you can also see those too. It'll have all the previous WIDA scores anything related to WIDA, the tests that the students has taken. It'll have the WIDA can-do descriptors. It'll have the goals on there for the students that they want them to reach. And then you can also have a signature page to where you can require the parents to sign it. You can have the classroom teacher sign it. You could even have an administrator sign it. And that's just a good way of knowing that everyone has reviewed this, is in agreement, and it's, going to do everything within the ILP. And
and it's great that it is customizable to your needs. So like you said, you can bring in a lot of different things, but then you don't want it to end up 10 pages long again, but it's
correct.
It's just, it's great. What can we say?
I would say our average ILP is probably 2 to 3 pages, no matter how much you put on there. I don't think it's more than 3 pages. So we were requiring, that parents have to sign. We send home the signature page, we send home the ILP, and they have to sign it that they're in agreement with those goals. And sometimes, they might want to tweak those goals, or like, no, I really think that he needs an additional goal added. So similar to like an IEP. But of course, since, students have been virtual now, what we've been doing is just like a verbal agreement, and the teacher is just writing in where the parent signature line is, verbal agreement on date, whatever the date might be.
Yeah.
But we are loving it.
I was going to say that's good to know. I mean, with any, whatever the format is that you send your ILPs home with, this year we chose to send them via email because, again, we're not in person, and, do a follow-up phone call as needed. But we had to really just stop and think, how are we going to communicate this out to parents this year? So we chose email. And then, of course, there's always the risk of an email not being up to date. So then what do you do in that manner? So we had a lot of different discussions in terms of how to communicate. Some teachers chose to send it home via Class Dojo as an individual assignment so that not everybody can see it. So, we know our teachers are creative, and if there's a will, there's a way. They'll find it for sure.
Yes. And so here we just wanted to pause for any questions you might have, anything that we previously talked about that you want to ask about, or just anything else that's come into your head that you would like to ask us, or maybe some just comments that you have. So we'll see if Dr. Clark has any questions that have come in.
A few comments related to the previous question you asked for them to share ideas. Someone mentioned Zoom breakout rooms. Okay, that is one good thing. And another person mentioned congregate.
Congregate.
Not any other information was given, but congregate. So now, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I would like to hear more about that. Maybe that person can put that on the discussion board later and tell us more about it. Congregate. That would be great.
Gigi commented on an idea that we've actually discussed before in the ELL Collaborative. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. The idea of combining districts and, smaller districts, rural districts, districts with fewer resources, fewer staff, etc. The idea of combining resources and sharing resources, combining resources. I teach school finance, but I'm not a school finance person. I just wonder, what are your thoughts? Has anyone done any cross-district combination of resources to make these purchases? Or Nancy, Deborah, have you done it? What are your thoughts on that?
We have not done that, but I would love to know if you guys could put in the comments in the live chat. I would love to know if there are any districts that have done it and how that worked out, but we have not done it. But Deborah maybe has.
Well, I was going to say, as a larger district, we have not, but I do know that it's an option. Like if you want to become, within Title III, if you have a consortium, if you want to join other districts. So, and not specific to ESL, but I know we have several municipalities right outside of Shelby County who have in the past have had shared resources. So that's something that maybe we could reach out to them to get more information on.
It uses the idea of economy of scale to, really make better use of resources. So love to hear any thoughts on that. And again, there will be a discussion board following this that will stay open for any ongoing questions or comments. So let's see, that's all I see on the chat right now. And so if y'all will please continue.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Clark. All right.
All right, so next we're going to discuss translations, and we're going to be discussing in-person translations, phone translations, and written translations, and also just some other resources that you can use for translations. So the first one I wanted to touch on relates to in-person translations. So in our district, what we utilize for in-person translation are staff members, and then for phone translations, we use Stratus. So Stratus is, it costs around, I think it's $1.49, $1.50 per minute. It has over 200 different languages, and you can use it for your video, phone, translation, or in person too. And it's available 24/7. So how we utilize it when I say in person is that if the person is right there in front of you, you could put it on speakerphone, and so that way the translator's on the line and is translating between the two of you. And you can also utilize it like as a three-way call, so that the person is the translator calls the person that you're wanting to speak to, and they're translating back and forth. And it works out very seamlessly, very easily. And then we're also going to be discussing the written translation. So let me go back to the in-person translation. So for in-person translations, what we do is we contract with parents and families from the local community. And I also contract with teachers from our school district, and they do the in-person translations either before school, after school, but that's all they can typically do, is not during the school work hours. So then I also contract with people that are outside of the district. So as far as parents and families and just some other people that I have found that work at different places that speak, English or English and Spanish or whatever language, and English fluently, and they're able, because those are the ones that are able to come in and do the translations during the school day, because the teachers cannot. But I do contract with them because I do believe that ESL teachers shouldn't be used as translators because they need to be teaching. And so if they're constantly being taken out of classes to do translations, then the students are the ones that are missing out of instruction they should be receiving. So I really am a big proponent of making sure that my ESL teachers are not used for translations. And if they are, they're being paid for it after hours. And the phone translation service the name of it is Stratus, and it was previously called Optimal, and we love it. I think this will be our 5th year using it, and there is not a language that we have come across that they do not have a translator for. Typically, the translator is on the line within 2 minutes max. And so there's not any like awkward time where you're, on the line waiting, or the person's right there in front of you waiting. And so it's worked out great. So also our SPED department learned about it, through us using it for ESL. And so they've also gone ahead and purchased it. Another thing for in-person translations is that sometimes you can reach out to your local hospital or to your court. And so sometimes they might have translator recommendations. Sometimes those translators that work for the court or for the hospital will leave their cards, and they're like, hey, please share my information. So that is another resource that maybe you can utilize if there's not anybody in your district or parents or families that could, translate in person. That's another idea to look into. Now, of course, Google Translate could be used, but I would only recommend Google Translate for simple notes, not a whole document or anything like that. And I don't think it's a good idea for that. And I know that Deborah had a story about how they used Google Translate, and so that's why.
And I know we've probably all had these little experiences, but most recently, before we went on fall break last week, there was an automatic text that went out, and I honestly don't know what system was used, but it was to parents, and they were telling parents that, the makeup pickup day to come get your materials is, today from 3 to 5. Well, because of the word makeup in there, it was inviting parents to come pick up their face makeup, today from 3 to 5. And fortunately, one of our bilingual mentors who is stationed at a school had a niece going to this school, and they emailed me, oh, Miss France, what can we do about this? Because this is telling the parents to go pick up makeup. And it's just like, okay, and then of course the principal is like, oh my goodness, I didn't realize that's what it said. So it's just, you get these kind of funny stories. And thankfully it was kind of funny and not really, it didn't offend anybody, but it does, it does lend itself to just the emphasis that you do have to be careful with these kinds of things. And Nancy, you mentioned in-person translations as well. We're fortunate, and depending, of course, on your smaller or larger districts, if you have a full-time person on staff, it could be at a school. We also do contracts with outside vendors, just like you do. I was going to mention, local universities are also a good place to find translators. And we've even worked with a professor at the University of Memphis who does training for translators, and he came here to give a training to our existing bilingual mentors. So it's just that partnership, again, goes back to collaboration, really, to finding the best people. Dr. Clark?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in a minute on this particular question because a couple of ideas came through.
Sure.
Joseph mentioned a couple of call-in interpreter services they've used where it's reasonable pricing. LLS and LTC. Those are both on the chat.
Okay.
Also from Ezra, he reminded us that the Tennessee Foreign Language Institute is a statewide service. However, their name has now changed to the Tennessee Language Center, he said.
Perfect.
We haven't worked with them in a while, but that is a statewide resource, perhaps. Tennessee Language Center.
Yeah, thank you both for that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Those are great resources. Something else I wanted to mention as far as written translations. So the same thing kind of with what we do with the in-person translations, I also contract with teachers in the district to do written documents, and I also contract with people from the community. But I will say, if you are going to use a parent or a family from the community to do written translations, I would definitely suggest that you give some kind of a test to ensure that they are fluent in their writing. Because just because a person is fluent in their speaking and does a great job when you use them for in-person translations, it doesn't mean that that's going to translate the same ways for written documents. I have definitely been guilty of using somebody for in-person who did amazingly and then using them for a written translation. And I definitely realized at that point that I needed to start doing some kind of test for fluency.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because that's, I think it's just like our students, they may be more proficient in speaking and less in writing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely something that we've interviewed a few people along the way as well. And it's just like, okay, verbally, it's fantastic. But in terms of the written, it's not going to work.
I know you said there was another program that you used, ELSA, for translations.
So we are looking into, it's actually changed its name. It was ELSA, and now it's RTT Mobile. I think it's real-time translations. And then, Nancy, you're mentioning Stratus. You might want to check to see if you are interested in Stratus, because I was recently looking at different companies as well. And they may have like some special, like if your school district is a member of some type of a Vizient program, I'm just learning about this myself, but you get special pricing. So, which is even lower than the $1.50. So every penny counts.
Yes.
So yeah, just check into all of those.
Right, and then just a little bit more information about Stratus. So there's no special technology that's needed when you're using it. And as I mentioned, the interpreter is typically on the phone within 2 to 3 minutes. And it can be used, if the person is in person or on 3-way calls. And last thing I wanted to suggest is that I would definitely recommend having a person or a team, if you're a larger district, that approves the phone calls. So I'll just give you an example. So at the beginning, what we did was we gave access to all of the secretaries and trained them on the use of the phone interpretation system and let them know that they could let whoever in their building utilize it. Well, when we got the bill, it's a pretty big bill. So then when we're reviewing calls and I'm calling certain secretaries that had used it a lot more than others and just schools, they were like, well, let's say Mike, he didn't like what was in his lunchbox, so he wanted me to call his mom. Well, that's not a good use of an interpretation system that costs this much per minute. So, and then another thing is that we found that a lot of the times the teachers and or secretaries are not just taking the time to just try to call the parent first to see if they speak English or not. Just because a student is an English learner does not equal that their parents do not speak English. So I think it's also important for the teacher to always make that attempt, or the secretary to always make that attempt first to call, instead of using the program, because sometimes we've had people that use it and they're like, oh, they speak English, so the translator's just kind of hanging on the line and still charging us,
Yeah.
and there wasn't even a need for it. So I am the approver of the phone calls in our district, and so basically they just have to give me the reason that they're making the call, and if I find that it is a good use of the money funding, then I approve the call right away. But I think it's made people more cautious when they're sending me the requests now, because they know, okay, I can't send her for a candy bar that we want to use the phone translation service.
No. All right, that's very good advice, because I know we've been kind of thinking through that as well, just for protocols in our district.
And then I just wanted to touch on a few more. So we kind of talked about the Google Translate, and I just wouldn't recommend Google Translate for full documents. Duolingo is very similar to Rosetta Stone, and you can use it to learn other languages, and you can also use it to translate like sentences or phrases as well. Blooms and Remind, they have a feature within it so where you can contact parents in Spanish. I'm not sure if it does other languages, but I know for sure that you can send messages to parents in Spanish. And then I wanted to mention this Scan and Translate app. If your district, you don't have a budget to where you can have a lot of translations, or you can't contract with somebody, this is an app that I found. It's called Scan and Translate, and I think it costs like $33 a year. And what it does is that you can scan any document and it'll translate all of the words on that document. So I thought that, definitely was worth sharing. And then lastly, a photo translator. So the photo translator, you can put it up to any document, or say if you're in a presentation, at a parent meeting, and it'll translate all of the words on the screen or on the document to any language. So we had an instance where we had a presentation at a school, and there was a mom that had just gotten here from Japan, and she's just sitting there lost during the presentation. So I just downloaded that app on my phone, the phone translator. I gave her my phone, and she was able to put it up to the presentation, and she was able to follow along great after that, and something so small, and it made a big difference. And those are some of the resources, and you guys definitely let us know some other resources in the chat box if you have some other ones.
That's great. That's great. So we're going to move on here just a little bit to talk about community resources. We realize that we have to support children academically, and if you're new to the community, you're not going to know quite even where to go. I remember a few years ago, I moved just to a different part of town. It was like, okay, where's the Kroger? Where do I go? Is there a Target near here? So it's like, where do I go? And if you can imagine immigrants coming in, and it's just like, here I am in a totally different country. Where do I start? Where do I begin? Where can I get help? So realizing as well that all English learners are not immigrants, and all immigrants are not English learners, we came up with some departmental resources, and that kind of spun into a collaboration with the community. So I was just going to share with you our table of contents for this particular guide. As you can see, it's a SCS community resource guide from our department. And beyond the welcoming and about ESL and about our particular student demographics and the department contacts, we also have information about just daily life, health information, legal services, other services, which, I'll give you the link to this at the end of this presentation, where you can just kind of go in and see the entire booklet. But in particular, someone mentioned adult ESL. So it's not just adult ESL from our department, but it's the community adult ESL places and within the Memphis area. Family resources, and all the way through job, career, utilities, recreation, social leisure. So, if you're here and you're new and you have children and funds might be kind of limited, where are the free places to go? Or those places that are just really, very low price to get into? I have 3 kids. I know what it's like. It's like, hey, where do we go that's the cheapest, right? That kind of spun into this collaboration with the Venezuelan community, and through that, the Hola Memphis resource was developed. Theirs is obviously much more beautiful. It's color. It's completely in Spanish. It's truly gorgeous, and there will be the link as well at the bottom, at the end of this presentation, for you to look at as well. And then I just wanted to mention that we are extremely fortunate in this department in that we have our own professional counselor, school counselor. I mention this because in our district, we have a number of students who are coming in with foreign transcripts who are high school aged, and we really needed an expert on staff to help those within the district to determine what credits would transfer in. So this is something through the resources that she continues to gather as a counselor. We created a Padlet. Our instructional team also has numerous other Padlets, but this is the one that I'm sharing with you today around parent and community resources. So you can see here, there's information on the Memphis Food Bank, financial aid available for certain families. Also, how to access Teams in multiple languages, as well as, if you need tech support. So I mention all of these because, there are, we have it in the old fashioned, if you will, the paper version here, so that if you're there, we have welcome packets for immigrants. We can hand this to them. And then, of course, the Venezuelan community for Hola, that's a paper version as well. But we can also guide families to these online resources. Okay, and then I want to also mention, just in doing a bit of research, if you don't have something already developed and you just kind of need a starting place beyond those resources that were shared, there's a site called Informed Immigrant. And this is the landing page, if you will, when you go there. But the really neat thing about this website is that you can search by state and by zip code. And, currently, Tennessee, there are only 7 results. But it's a starting place, okay? And I don't know, it could be something that we need to look into that maybe we can contribute to if you have something in your area and you want to provide the information to them. But here we see an example of, the free food bank. So I just wanted to share that with you as well. And we're at a point in our presentation where we would like to invite you to think back upon some of the engagement strategies that maybe we were able to have you participate in today. And we're going to see how many of them we can list here on the next slide. And we're also going to do, before we leave, a little bit of reflection on self-care, because we certainly know that without you being recharged and energized, then our students aren't going to fully benefit from our teaching. Okay. So let's think here for a moment. How many engagement strategies can you recall from today's presentation? If you were here at the very beginning, I think you'll kind of realize that we started with a student interest or an opinion. Do you like pumpkin spice? Joseph, we know you don't like pumpkin spice. So we love Joseph. So anyway, we just want to kind of think back, all right, how else can we get to know our students? That was one way, the student interest survey. Then we also we're going to ask you here in a few moments towards the end, we asked you at the very beginning to jot down your favorite ESL resource. So in a way, this is kind of like, hey, we're gauging your background knowledge, how familiar are you with ESL resources, and then how can we move forward with sharing additional information with you. We attempted to gauge your feelings about the IOPs. So what was your reaction to IOPs? Are you nervous? Are you really excited? So that's another way to get students involved in the learning. And we tried to make a personal connection with you in terms of words that resonated with you around why the IOP is important. We know that making those connections with students are important so that they can feel obviously just more connected with the learning, and so that it becomes more meaningful to them and it's more memorable. IOP accommodation ideas, you guys were fantastic in leaning in and just really sharing information about how we can learn from one another and IOP accommodation ideas. And then I don't want you guys to forget about Kahoot. So I'll put this in here, the checks for understanding. If you haven't tried Kahoot, it's super fun. And we hope that you'll get a chance to check that out. Okay, so that's just a quick recap on some things that we had you participate in today with us. And before we leave, we want you to remember that self-care is not selfish. Compassion fatigue is real, and this is taken from the distance learning guide as well. I've referenced it in a couple of slides up at the top, and you'll have that information in a moment. But let's look at this quote here from Fisher, Fry, and Hattie. Compassion fatigue is a combination of physical, emotional, and spiritual depletion associated with the work we do with others. So again, we're going to ask you to please just take care of yourself. Make sure that you're looking out for number one, right? Can you relate to this? You need to make time for yourself and listen to your needs. If you feel exhausted, allow yourself to get some rest. If you feel sad, allow yourself to feel the pain. If you make a mistake, don't be mad at yourself. It's okay. You're learning. You are growing. I forgot to unmute myself at the beginning. I'm learning. I'm growing. I'm not mad at myself. Do you remember that you deserve forgiveness and you deserve happiness? And above all, this is something my mom used to say, she still says to me, if you don't pick a day to relax, your body's going to pick it for you. So make time to relax. And so as we have individualized learning plans for our students, we want you just to make sure that you're taking time to make that an individualized support plan for you. So whether or not your self-care looks like this or like this, you know, some of us really get just energized when we get things done, right? It's like, oh, I can do this. I can do this. I'm finished. Now I can go enjoy my day. Whatever works for you is what works for you, right? And it's all good. There is, again, at this for the distance learning playbook, there's actually a compassion fatigue inventory. So based on this, just take a moment here to reflect how many yeses and nos you would come up with. My colleagues seem to lack understanding. So sometimes when we're burned out, it's like, oh, nobody understands me. I'm not going to go into all of these, or hopefully you haven't lost your sense of hopefulness. As a teacher, as an educator, part of our job is remaining excited and involved in the work and the learning. But again, this resource is here for you to investigate upon the opportunities that you get. And before we go, and I know we do have time for Q&A, so I don't want everybody to think that it's time to log off just yet, but we have some more resources to show you. But what is one strategy or one resource that we've talked about today that you're committed to investigating to trying before the end of October? So we're going to pause here for just a moment to see what kind of results we get in the chat. It could be one of the resources that Nancy spoke to you about at the beginning. It could be one of the student strategies. It could be a self-care tactic that you're like, yeah, you know what? I really need to go with that facial. That would make me feel a lot better. Or I really need to just, knock off all the things on my to-do list. That would make me feel a lot better. So we're going to take just a moment here to invite you to put in the chat really what's something that you heard today that you're rather enthusiastic about wanting to try. Okay?
All right. We hope that today you've had an opportunity to share ideas and learn from each other. We realize that within today's allotted time, we could not cover or reference everything that is out there in the world of ESL. But at this time, we invite you to do two things. Place your name and email in the chat if you'd like to connect via email with an ESL colleague, and then type in who or what is your favorite ESL resource. And that could be an author, a book, a blog, or a podcast, or it could be anything else as well. As presenters, we won't be able to see those emails right now while we're in the stream, but when we finish, we will have access to be able to view that. But hopefully we can all begin to develop a support team of colleagues so that we can remain connected and bounce ideas off one another as needed throughout the school year. Also, information about the discussion board will be given by Dr. Clark at the end of the presentation.
So, Dr. Clark, can we pause for a moment? Is there anything that's coming through the live stream that we need to mention at this point?
I don't think so. We had a couple of ideas pop up in response to your question.
Okay,
And,
great.
So Ezra mentioned a short video on regarding accessibility features in the Microsoft Suite, and he actually put a link on the chat. So if you'll refer to that chat, thanks Ezra for that. Jennifer says she wants to learn more about Ready, Set, Go for newcomers. I'll leave that with, hold on just a minute on that one. Matthew says, I've used Kahoots before, but I'd really like to get back into the swing of using it with my students now. Let's see. Yeah, we have some emails popping up now. So
Great.
any further comment on the Ready, Set, Go for newcomers?
So it's definitely a newer program through Continental. So I think it came out close to the end of last school year. And so we kind of started piloting it, but then school got out, February, March. So we've really started getting back in the swing of using it. But the ESL teachers that are at the middle and high school levels are loving using it with newcomers. They feel like it's become the best resource that they've had for your age appropriate, including age appropriate materials for your 6th through 12th graders. I will say it's very affordable. I would definitely recommend going to the www.Continental Press website and checking it out. And always there'll be the next box that comes up will have my email address. Feel free to shoot me any questions you have. And you will be receiving a copy of this presentation. There's also contact information for the representative that you would want to reach out to get some samples or learn more about it. But I'd be willing to help and answer any questions I can as well.
Thank you for that. We did want to share also, just to let you know, when you get access to the PowerPoint, if you're just getting started in ESL or supporting English learners, there's some compliance resources that you may want to be familiar with. So that's on this particular slide here. We'll leave for you. And then just again, if you're interested in additional student engagement, this particular book does lend itself to thinking about functions of engagement and not just tools. So, using Kahoot is fantastic. But then, what exactly are we trying to do with it? So are we asking students to find information, use information, create information, or share information? And more information can be found within that particular resource. There's an advertisement for Kahoot because I love it so much. And then here are the links to maybe some additional topics you might want to investigate, how to integrate social emotional learning with English learners. There's a multilingual glossary of academic terms. This is a Kahoot collection from this person. As I was looking around in Kahoot again, he has a ton of ESL resources that may or may not apply to what you're doing currently in your room. I just thought I'd drop that there. And then this is really nice from Sarah Otto in terms of just focusing in on the 3 C's for English learners: comfort, communicate, and connect. It's a really short little 3-minute video that is well worth the time. And then there's the results or the links to the resources earlier for the community.
Something else I wanted to mention is I know that Jen Lanier has been doing some webinars on related to ESL, especially the latest one had to do with the ESL toolkit.
Yeah.
And those can be accessed through ePlan.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. Definitely, because she really just breaks it down. So that is a resource.
We truly appreciate you sharing your time and expertise with us. And we hope to stay in contact with you and see you again. I'm Dr. Laura Clark, Director of the Center for Educational Media at MTSU's College of Education. Thank you for joining us today for the ELL Collaborative at MTSU.